On this Thursday night, exclusive new details on the Nova Scotia gunman's cold-blooded rampage. The crucial information his girlfriend provided to the police, plus the people who just missed running into the gunman.
I guess I was really lucky.
Ontario's premier on the out-of-control outbreaks in long-term care homes.
Anyways, the system, we can do better.
As COVID-19 begins to spread inside Quebec hospitals.
We're going through tough times.
Plus, planning for the new normal. Saskatchewan lays out a phased-in strategy to start reopening the economy.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We have lots to get to tonight, including how outbreaks of COVID-19 in long-term care homes are out of control in some places, especially Quebec and Ontario. But we begin with exclusive new information about the mass murder in Nova Scotia. 22 people were killed when a gunman went on a rampage over the weekend. The RCMP have not released a timeline or much detail about the chaotic 14 hours or so between when the first call came in until the gunman was shot and killed. But our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson, is hearing some exclusive details from her sources. Mercedes, what can you tell us?
Well, Donna, we're getting a little bit of a picture of what happened that night before the gunman's rampage. He and his girlfriend attended a party that was just down the street from where his cottage was in Portapique. At that party, I am told that they got into an argument. Both left at some point and went back to his cottage. At that point, he escalated and became violent with his girlfriend. He assaulted her, and then he proceeded to tie her up. Luckily, Donna, she managed to escape and run into the woods. After that, at some point, the gunman goes out with a number of firearms, and he begins shooting people, including at the house where the party was held. Then there's a bit of a black hole. We don't know what comes next, but the next thing that we learn that is at 7 a.m. the next day, the RCMP find the gunman's girlfriend. She has been hiding, and she is able to give them critical information that changes, frankly, the entire scope of the investigation and how they're looking for him. She reveals to them that he is likely dressed as a police officer and driving an extremely realistic car that looks just like an RCMP cruiser. And she, in fact, Donna, is the person who provided the picture to the RCMP that we all saw on Twitter and how they got the news out that he was impersonating a police officer. So really critical information from someone who had gone through so much trauma but had managed to escape.
Mercedes, have you been able to discover anything about the firearms used and also how this all came to an end?
So, Donna, we've learned that he had access to a number of firearms, and we don't have an exact number, but I can tell you some of the types of firearms that he had access to. There was a handgun, including a handgun that he stole from Constable Heidi Stephenson after he killed her. He also had access to a rifle and to a shotgun. Police are still trying to figure out how he got those guns and where they came from, but we do know those are the types he had access to. I can tell you in terms of how this all concluded, on the second day, on the Sunday, he was out in the RCMP cruiser. At that point, he ran into the officer who was shot, Officer Morrison, and he shot him while he was driving by that officer's police cruiser. Heidi Stephenson, the constable who died in the line of duty, then hears about the fact that he's in a police car and spots him. My sources say she rammed him. They went off the road. There was an exchange of fire, and he killed her. He then takes her sidearm. He carjacks another car, and that is the silver car we heard about, ends up at a gas station where, by chance, a member of the RCMP emergency response team and one of the K9 officers pull in. They look across. They see the car. They realize it is the gunman. At that point, he reaches for his gun, and the emergency response team member opens fire and kills him.
Mercedes, it had to have been an extremely chaotic and stressful nearly 14 hours for the RCMP. There are lots of questions about why the public was not alerted a gunman was on the loose that night. What does what you've learned reveal about that? Did they think they had him or at least had him contained?
Well, they didn't realize he'd slipped containment until the next day, and they've talked about that. And I think part of when they might have realized that, according to my sources, is that when they realized he might be in a police uniform. And I'm not clear on if they knew exactly where he was before that, but there is certainly concern, and they are looking into whether that police uniform and police car might have helped him escape. Because if you're looking for a gunman, you're not looking for a police officer. So that's certainly part of the investigation they're looking into. They're also looking into the RCMP response. There's questions about training. There's questions about why, as you say, Donna, an alert didn't go out. There was a tweet that went out that referred to a firearms complaint. That didn't quite describe what was happening, which was a mass shooting with fires everywhere. And that potentially could have saved lives. So there's a lot of questions about how all this was communicated. It's a very complex investigation. But on a bit of a more human note, Donna, I can tell you for the officers that were involved in this, I've been told it was extremely traumatic. The crime scenes that they were on were like nothing they've experienced, and there will be a lot of healing to be done in that community.
There sure will. Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. The RCMP in Nova Scotia did not hold a briefing today. The investigation, as Mercedes says, is still in the early stages. They are mourning one of their own, and there remain many questions. As Ross Lord reports, there are new stories emerging of people grateful they didn't end up in the gunman's path.
The more Nova Scotians learn about the shooter's movements, the more grateful some are that they left the areas he visited just in time.
I was really lucky because thinking about it, you know, this would have been crime scene number 17.
Almost an hour before he was killed in a confrontation with RCMP officers, the suspect appeared to stop his mock RCMP vehicle in a parking lot. He calmly got out to change his clothes, then continued driving up the road. That's what appears to be shown in surveillance video obtained by Global News and originally posted to Facebook on Wednesday, only to be taken down hours later. Minutes before that, the owners of a business at the same location decided to close the shop, having just heard from friends on Facebook about an active shooter in the area.
And I'm grateful that he did, because if an RCMP officer pulled into our parking lot, my father wouldn't have hesitated to go outside to see if he needed help or see if he needed anything.
The gunman had a hit list, according to a man who says police told him he was on it. Nathan Staples reportedly says investigators told him the list was found at a property of the shooter. He guesses the shooter listed him because he refused to sell him a used police car. A New Brunswick man who resells decommissioned RCMP vehicles says the gunman came to him almost 2 years ago looking to make a purchase, describing himself as a retired Mountie.
The reason that he wanted the car was to put on his property to keep the locals from stealing everything out of his cottages.
Audio recordings of first responders shed light on their efforts at Portapique, the first of 16 crime scenes.
RCMP are requesting more ambulances, probably one more coming, and then at least one more standby. It's very vague what's going on down there, but there is for sure multiple patients down there.
I'm currently treating a member in the back of an ambulance.
Nova Scotia RCMP had scheduled a news conference for this evening, but late afternoon they called it off, saying they weren't ready. We're told a news conference is possible tomorrow, the same day as the virtual vigil to remember those killed in this tragedy. Donna.
All right. Ross Lord in Halifax, thanks. We're learning more tonight about some of the victims of last weekend's murder rampage. Global News has now confirmed the identities of 20 of the 22 people killed in Nova Scotia. Among them were Alana Jenkins and Sean McLeod. Both were correctional officers who had a passion for their careers, each other, and their community.
If there was two people that was ever any more loved or any more appreciated by a community, Alana was a real key to it all. She got everybody together.
The couple's home was burned down by the killer on Sunday morning. Their neighbor, Tom Bagley, was also killed while trying to save McLeod and Jenkins.
Tom, their neighbor, was on his daily walk and saw a fire. Of course, Tom, being Tom, rushed down the driveway. And, of course, unfortunately, there was still an active shooter, and Tom was shot in the yard.
While Nova Scotians grieve, they're also dealing with the impact of COVID-19. There were 4 more deaths in that province today. Across Canada, there are now more than 42,000 confirmed cases. More than 2,100 people are known to have died. Quebec has more than half the confirmed cases in Canada. Nearly 22,000 people there have tested positive for the virus. It also has the most deaths. More than 1,200 Quebecers have now died from COVID-19. Ontario has more than 12,000 confirmed cases now, and more than 700 people in that province have died from the virus. One of the positive cases in Ontario is the mother-in-law of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. She's 95. She lives in the West Park Long-Term Care Centre in Toronto. 13 residents there have died of COVID-19. There are hundreds of other outbreaks in long-term care homes, and today it was obvious the Premier and the Prime Minister know the anguish that's causing.
And you see a loved one with their elderly parent, and they put their hand up against the window. That's heartbreaking. Anyways, the system, we can do better.
We are failing our parents, our grandparents, our elders, the greatest generation who built this country. We need to care for them properly. There have been requests for military assistance by both Ontario and Quebec, which of course we will be answering. But this is not a long-term solution. In Canada, we shouldn't have soldiers taking care of seniors.
Soldiers taking care of seniors. It's happening all over Quebec now and parts of Ontario. They're filling the gaps left by hundreds of staff who aren't working anymore because they've tested positive or are too afraid of the risk. And now hospitals in Quebec are starting to see COVID-19 spread within their wards. As Mike Armstrong reports, some say it's a time bomb waiting to go off.
With just about every day that passes, this Montreal Cancer Centre changes its practices, reacting to the threat of COVID-19. Cancer patients showing up for treatment have their own door. They're also called the day before and pre-screened. They're asked if they have symptoms of COVID-19. That said, some nervous their treatment could be put off don't tell the truth.
In one case, someone was COVID positive and came in there, and so the nurses had to leave and be quarantined and be tested.
More and more hospitals are dealing with outbreaks, and they seem to be hitting the most vulnerable. At this hospital, there were outbreaks in both the oncology and dialysis wards. 34 outpatients only showing up for treatments instead caught COVID-19 from patients in the institution.
They were trying to keep that isolated, but it's almost impossible.
There is a case in Montreal of a man who was staying at this hospital to have his medication changed. His daughter says he instead contracted and died from COVID-19. She says she was reassured there was no danger. The coronavirus cases were on a different floor. Now, the other impact of the virus is on healthcare workers themselves. More and more are off the job. In Quebec, the Premier says about 4,000 have tested positive, but another 5,500 are off as a precaution or even over anxiety or burnout.
Unfortunately, the situation is getting worse and worse because today we have 800 people more missing.
Some long-term care facilities are without 50 to 70% of their staff. In some cases, it's not COVID-19 sending seniors to emergency rooms, it's that staff can't keep up with basic needs like food and water.
They didn't have fever, they weren't having breathing difficulties, but they were sick because they were dehydrated.
Now, 5 military medical teams hit the ground earlier this week, but that was a drop in the bucket. Well, Ottawa agreed Thursday to send 1,000 soldiers in Quebec long-term care facilities. They won't be trained going in, but the extra hands are desperately needed. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Lots of people across the country were watching the Premier of Saskatchewan closely today. Scott Moe laid out the most comprehensive plan yet for gradually lifting some restrictions on our lives. It applies only to Saskatchewan, and it won't get life back to normal, but instead to a new normal. As Eric Sorensen explains, it paints a picture of what life for all of us could look like one day.
Saskatchewan is ready to blaze a trail slowly to get its economy and life moving again. Starting in early May, all medical services will be available, including dentistry. Fishing can start and boat launches used. In mid-May, golf, but with restrictions. For example, new precautions such as an elevated cup. The ball just hits the hole, no hands going down into the cup. Starting May 19th, some retailers can open. They include clothing, shoes, flowers, sporting goods. And some personal services can open, like hairdressers, barbers, registered massage therapists. So no date yet for restaurants, bars, fitness facilities, and childcare. Much later still, indoor and outdoor recreation and entertainment facilities. In all cases, gatherings of no more than 10 people, all the while trying to limit the spread of COVID-19.
We have to find the middle ground that continues to keep our case numbers low and keep Saskatchewan people safe, while at the same time allowing for businesses to reopen and Saskatchewan people to get back to work.
How can Saskatchewan do it? Its outbreak is relatively under control.
Saskatchewan saw its first case in early March, but there was never a big surge. There were 30 cases on March 28th, but then down from there, in fact, just single digits over the last 2 weeks.
When will other provinces reopen? Saskatchewan's plan now out. Quebec, Manitoba, and Alberta say they'll have an update on their plans by next week. New Brunswick and PEI have plans in the works, they say. And for Ontario and BC, so far, they say no changes before sometime in May, a time frame that likely applies to all provinces. The plan recognizes the economy can't stand still forever. Health experts see the need for balance.
There needs to be a real tug of war between slowing the spread of the virus down, but obviously not being able to eliminate the spread, but at the same time being able to open up some of our industries so that we can start to function again.
Saskatchewan's is the first detailed plan. Others are watching. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
The virus has left all of us cooped up inside for weeks now. Lots of people getting itchy to get outside, especially as the weather warms up. Coming up, the balance between keeping people safe and sane. For the first time in almost a century, the Calgary Stampede has been canceled. Event organizers say it was a difficult decision, but the right thing to do. The world-famous rodeo drew more than 1.2 million visitors last year. It was set to begin in Calgary on July 3rd. There's no way to keep physically distant at the Stampede. There are key things that have to happen before it can go ahead again and the economy can reopen. A vaccine that works and aggressive testing. Today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced $1.1 billion will be devoted to that. The plan has three components: $115 million for research into vaccines and treatments being developed in Canadian hospitals and universities, $662 million for clinical trials, and $350 million to expand national testing and modeling for COVID-19. The Prime Minister also announced the creation of a new COVID-19 immunity task force. It will focus on serology testing, that's blood-based tests to determine if someone has been exposed to the virus and may be immune.
They'll be looking at key questions like how many people beyond those we've already tested have had COVID-19, whether you're immune once you've had it, and if so, how long that lasts.
Over the next 2 years, the plan is to test 1 million Canadians. Next, a look at the latest economic impact in the U.S. because of COVID-19. Millions more people have lost their jobs in the United States. More than 4 million laid-off workers filed for unemployment benefits last week. That means roughly 26 million Americans have now lost their jobs just in the past 5 weeks. The latest Department of Labor figures show the pace of layoffs in the U.S. has slowed slightly, but there's a backlog of claims, so millions more are likely to file in the coming weeks. The number of confirmed cases continues to soar in the U.S. More than 850,000 people have tested positive for COVID-19, and that only reflects those who have been tested. Deaths are also climbing. The official number surpassed 48,000 today. In New York alone, more than 15,000 people are now known to have died from COVID-19. Next, experts reality check how your summer dreams will be affected by COVID-19. We've been taking your questions about COVID-19 to the experts, and right now people are looking ahead to the summer, wanting to know if they'll need to alter their plans. Jeff Semple is here with some of the answers. Jeff?
Well, Donna, Canadians have been stuck indoors for weeks now, and with the arrival of warmer weather, many are now wondering when they'll be able to step outside and play.
I'm a golfer and very keen to get back on the course, but want to do so safely.
When it comes to outdoor activities, provinces are taking different approaches. Several, like Ontario, have locked down the links. But many of BC's golf courses are in full swing. Similarly, federal and provincial parks are closed until at least the end of May. But many municipal parks and private campsites remain open.
If you are outside and you are more than 2 meters away from other people, then you should get outside. I think where public health starts to worry is, do people actually comply with that?
But a walk in the park is one thing. What about walking down the aisle?
My question is in regards to my wedding that is upcoming in May and the groups of people that are allowed to congregate.
Alberta has banned gatherings of more than 15 people. In Ontario, no more than 5 are allowed. This BC couple was planning to invite 135 wedding guests, but settled for a few family members in their living room and their first dance in the street.
If weddings are able to go on, they're probably going to be smaller groups, and recommendations about spacing out the people.
Hi, my name's Karen Fleming. Is there any work being done or looking at of how to prevent a future scenario?
China recently announced a ban on wildlife markets, like the one in Wuhan where the outbreak started. But some of those have already reopened.
This needs a long-term solution for both China and every other country in the world that is selling wildlife.
But it's worth remembering that the SARS outbreak is also believed to have started at a live animal market in China. And at that time, 14 years ago, there were plenty of promises made for changes to ensure that nothing like that ever happened again. Donna?
Jeff Semple in Toronto, thanks. Well, in the midst of all this, birthdays are still being celebrated, without big parties, of course. We thought we'd leave you with this cute 2-year-old. Prince Louis is the youngest child of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, and she took these pictures. He's making a rainbow handprint picture, a tribute to healthcare workers. He looked perfect at first, and then, just like any other kid, the palace captioned this Instagram versus reality. Prince Charles marked his birthday with this sweet photo taken before the pandemic. He's doing what every grandparent longs to do again, give their grandkids a hug. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.